Hello, everyone. I wish you could all see what I'm looking at. It's incredible. Thank you for being here to help us celebrate the 2018 induction. And tonight in particular, the induction of the Moody Blues. I'm Greg Harris, and I'm honored to be the president and CEO of this great museum. And thank you. We've been open this is our 23rd year. We've had close to 12 million people in this museum. And everybody that's here has a favorite song, a favorite memory, a favorite moment. For many of you tonight, it's the guys you're going to hear from a little bit later on stage. But we all have this. Our mission here at the museum is to engage, teach, and inspire through the power of rock and roll. To engage, teach, and inspire through the power of rock and roll. You're here because you love this music, but you're also here because this music has enriched your lives. It's connected with you. It reminds you of the greatest days. It reminds you of the time you fell in love, the time your heart was broken, those great moments of your life. And odds are the people standing near you have had similar experiences. In a world with so many divisions, rock and roll connects all of us. And you're here tonight because of that. So thank you for celebrating with us. After this, come back and see us. We're open every day of the year, not just induction week. Come and see us. We have an amazing new Hall of Fame floor where on Saturday you will see the Moody Blues plaque installed in our Hall of Fame gallery. Please join me in welcoming, I heard a finally. Fair enough, I agree. The remarkable thing is, the first year this band was on the ballot, as soon as it went out to all the other voters, which are all the other inductees, music historians, rock critics, and others, they were elected in the first year they were on the ballot. So tonight we have two really special folks doing our interviewing. It's going to be broadcast on Sirius while it's happening. And representing Sirius from the Volume Channel, wonderful author, writer, great friend of the museum, and a real knowledgeable historian, Mr. Alan Light. Come on up, Alan. And joining Alan will be Jason Hanley, our Vice President of Education and Visitor Engagement here at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Please join me in welcoming Jason Hanley to the stage. Jason. Okay. Have a great night, have a great induction week, and long live rock.
Wow, check out this crowd tonight. Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing? Alan and I just got off the Volume show, Debatable. Great day.
I am the co-host of Debatable on SiriusXM's Volume Channel 106. We were just broadcasting up from the fifth floor. You guys were kind enough to let us crash today and tomorrow.
Yeah, it was good to get up there and talk with you guys too and host the show. Thank you so much to everybody coming out this evening. This is a really special thing, as Greg said, to have the inductions here in Cleveland, to have a band like the Moody Blues getting inducted on Saturday night. I'm a longtime fan myself, as I know Alan is. We're both very excited about it. Just a few things before we get started. I wanted to thank Eagle Rock Entertainment. Did anybody get a chance to go upstairs and see the new Days of Future Past live upstairs today? Yeah, great. Great film, and thank you to Eagle Rock for letting us show it. I also want to make sure we thank all the other sponsors and funders who have made a lot of this whole week happen. So thank you to many of you who are out there tonight. Now, without further ado, let's give a warm Rock and Roll Hall of Fame welcome to Justin Hayward, John Lodge, Graeme Edge, the Moody Blues. Oh, we got a bunch up here behind us, too.
Thank you.
I love this hanging from the rafters thing going on
Yeah,
up here.
literally. Well, gentlemen, welcome to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Thank you for being here tonight.
Oh, great pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Yeah.
I know it's going to be a busy weekend, and for you to take the time and come out here and meet with us and all the fans, it's really something special, so we really appreciate it.
Well, we really appreciate them because without them, there'd be no us.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Well, Alan and I were talking the other day. You know, we've only got about an hour or so here now. We probably figured we could have gone about 5 or 6 days easy, right?
And we've got questions from folks out there to
right.
take as well. So
Absolutely. And Facebook Live, hello to everybody out there watching us on Facebook Live. And don't forget to send your questions in there. We'll be taking some of those as well. So I think to start it off, we're not going to be able to get through a career like you guys have had tonight. Over 50 years of great music. Again, incredible albums. But I actually wanted to kind of go back and start a little bit at the beginning. And particularly think about, you know, Graeme, you and I were even talking a little bit earlier today about that Birmingham music scene, right? And all of you, before being members of the Moody Blues, played in numerous outfits. And that music scene in England at the time was really something special. Graeme, can you start off, tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, we all heard music from America, you guys, and we thought it was absolutely stunning. And we all started doing little bands, you know, and doing our things up at anywhere we could play, anywhere they'd have us. And we gradually coalesced into bands. John, he was with El Riot and the Rebels, which was known as El Root and the Rabble. And I was in a band called Jerry Levine and the Avengers, which was Jerry Latrine and the Four Flushers. And I think what you were talking about was when we were billed up in Liverpool as Birmingham's top band. And we were billed in a club called the Cavern. And in those days, the bottom of the bill, which was us, opened. Then top of the bill got to play. And then bottom of the bill played again. And then top of the bill played to the end. And at the time we had a guy who was in pink, and we were all in gold lame. Oh, it's catchwick. We thought we looked really cool. And we played all top 40 hits, the bang-up records of the day. And then
Surefire crowd pleasers, right?
Yeah. And then the other group, which was from Liverpool, they came on and they were called the Beatles. And they played a song called Long Tall Sally, Paul McCartney. Well, at the time, that was dead in Birmingham because we had no idea about sounding ethnic. So it was Long Tall Sally, she's built sweet. That one got a cut in. So we're all there sitting in the back having a beer and thinking these guys are gonna, bomb out because we played all the good stuff. And then Paul McCartney ripped into that, and then they did P.S. I Love You, and then they did Twist and Shout, and we didn't stay around after that. We went over to the pub, got drunk, because as the whole world got to know after that, they were possibly the most talented people that England has ever produced, apart from us.
I want to jump, I guess it's a bit forward or all the way forward, I don't know. You talk about the impact that, say, the Beatles had, but when I think about what induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame means for anybody, to me it means somebody who changed the game, where music was different after that band came and did whatever it is that they did. From the perspective that you've got, how do you look at the Moody Blues career and think, here's what it is that we did that nobody had done before. Here's the impact that we left.
I think we were playing before Days of Future Past, sort of copies of American songs, and you know when you sing it about the blues from the Delta, and you're from Birmingham and you've never been there. It was sort of the wrong way of doing it, but we realized what blues and rock and roll was about. It was about growing up, and we decided, why don't we write about us growing up? And sort of, it became sort of an English blues type thing. And if we were truthful with what we were writing, we thought we'd have a relationship with an audience, because I think we all have, when we're growing up, these hopes and dreams and, you know, looking for something that's going to be great in our lives. And I think that's what we tried to do with our music. And I think that's what brought us here today, really.
I mean, that transformation is amazing, right? I've often thought about that, going from the period where you're copying and doing a lot of the American R&B and blues, and then to make an album like Days of Future Past, which is so different than anything that had come before it, right? An amazing record, copies of it out there.
Copies being waved in the audience, very nice.
You know, I often think too, you know, originally, as the story goes, you guys were sort of brought in to do a rock version of Dvorak's New World Symphony, right? Tell that story a little bit again. How did that get to the point where you were going to cook up something so original, like what ended up being that album, out of the idea of doing Dvorak's Symphony?
Well, it was, we were very, very fortunate. We actually owed Decca some money, the record company. And, but it was in the great days of when these big record companies had fabulous recording studios. So, which is something that I think we were very lucky that young people of today, you know, don't have that really, but they can probably do it in their bedroom. But we came from that generation where the companies had fabulous recording studios and fabulous engineers and producers, and we owed them some money. So they had a call on us as a group, and I came to the group as a. I'm not from Birmingham. I'm from the West Country, and I was playing with a rock and roll singer called Marty Ward before, but then I started writing, and I came to the group as a writer really, and I was pretty lousy at the rhythm and blues things, but so we started to think that maybe this is the way we should just do our own material, and that's what should happen. So Decca had a call on us because we owed them some money. And for some equipment, I think that they paid for to an ex-manager. So they approached us, the man with the beautiful name of Michael Dacre Barclay, terribly English public school boy, approached us about this concept that they wanted to actually demonstrate their stereo systems, because Decca they had a consumer division. So they asked us if we would make a demonstration stereo record that would demonstrate that stereo could be as interesting for rock and roll as it was for classical music. Decca owned the second largest classical catalog in the world after Deutsche Grammophon. In fact, Deutsche Grammophon, that was the reason they bought Decca afterwards. And so they wanted to sell their stuff. So
right. Disc like that would allow them to sort of let classical audiences and rock audiences hear how great the sound was.
What they didn't know was that FM radio was just starting here. But and which needed that stereo picture stuff, not just like George was doing down the road from where we were, drums on the left and vocals on the right. They needed proper stereo. So they asked us to do Michael Dacre Barclay, terribly posh, was the guy who came up with this idea of us doing Dvorak. And Peter Knight, I remember Peter Knight saying, who was also signed to Decca, who had an orchestral arranger, and the idea was to put us together. We would do our version of Dvorak, and then Peter would play the real Dvorak between us. So, and I remember him saying that, well, the New World Symphony only has really one melody that you can turn into a rock thing. And I'm not sure you guys are going to do it. This is how I remember it. And he came to see us at the 100 Club in Oxford Street. We were playing there. And we played our set, which included all our own songs. And afterwards, he said, maybe it should be the other way round. I'll do the links between your songs. And so we had the studio time, so we went in and recorded our songs. We recorded Nights several months before. Nights in White Satin was recorded in the May, I think, of that year. So we had that. And then Peter Knight took the melodies of our songs and did the links, orchestral links between them. And then, so we just did it the other way around. And we had an executive producer called Hugh Mendel, who we used to call Huge Muddle, but charming old gentleman. And he really loved what we'd done. And so Peter Knight recorded his orchestral stuff after our songs, all done in a week, and then presented it to Decca. And they said, well, this is not Dvorak. And Hugh Mendel said, well, I know, but maybe there's something in it. And they released it as a demonstration record, and it just grew and grew. We played at Midem in the south of France, and we played Nights, and literally the next day, it was a hit. We only played at Midem because the Supremes didn't turn up. And they had live Eurovision, and we were the only people with Long John Baldry. I don't know, does anybody remember Long John Baldry? He was a friend of ours, but we were the only people that could actually play live. Everybody else was miming, so us and Long John Baldry played live, and it exploded from there, really.
But it's fascinating.
That's the story of it.
To hear the story of how you sort of backed into that structure for the album, because the album...
Can I just say something else as well? We were very lucky that we didn't have an A&R guy telling us to make a hit. We were lucky that it was a record that we could just do what we wanted to do with our own songs without anybody overseeing us. And I think we've stayed true to that to this day. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're able to be here now, really, because I think, nobody had any hopes that it would be a commercial success. I mean, these our girlfriends then, who are our wives now and family, they were there and they came to listen. Do you remember? You came to listen to Days of Future Past, and nobody had this is going to be a big hit or anything like that. It was just, it's lovely and it's beautiful and it's romantic, and that's what we thought, and that was the purpose. So there you go.
No, it was just that also when we were recording, in those days you did 3-hour sessions in the studio. But the head of the Decca Record Company was a wonderful, wonderful chap. And he let us have the studio 24 hours a day. And that made all the difference for us, because 4 o'clock in the morning, brilliant time to record.
Which we should say, in England at the time, that would have been very unusual to have access to the studio like that, right? I mean,
after Days of Future Past, but then the old gentleman in Decca said, "Oh, these boys have really got something, you know. So we'll give them the studio so we could." And John and I were coming home one day in a car, and we pulled up at the birds were twittering. It was about 7 o'clock in the morning, and we pulled up at Belsize Park on the way home. and we had the windows open, and we pulled up by a bus stop at the corner there, and at the traffic lights, and this lady looked in the car, and she said, "Look, that's how those boys get a car like that. They get up early in the morning." And we'd got up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, actually. And we're coming home at 8 o'clock in the morning. Yeah.
It's the work ethic. That's what it all comes down to. But before we lose that thought, I was going to say, fascinating to hear that way that Days of Future Past sort of backed into that structure, because it was such a revolutionary, the notion of thinking about an album and thinking about extending those themes, those motifs, connecting these things. Was that something that you had been thinking about prior to that?
Yeah. I don't think so. We thought about the story and the day in the life of one guy. That was a connection. But no.
I think one of the things as well is that the promoters in those days used to say, well, we can't book the Moody Blues because you could dance to one of the songs, then you can't dance to the next one, and then another song stops in the middle, and they start fiddling about on a flute. And but we realized that's who we were, and we realized an audience were going to sit down and listen to the Moodies, and we realized that's what the album was about: sitting down, listening to the Moodies with friends and doing whatever, getting the double gatefold album, opening it up, doing whatever, and just generally enjoying the whole thing, And I think that's who the Moody Blues are.
And even right from that record, Graeme, your poetry that, for me, I know listening to that album when I was younger, the poetry opening over the sort of overture that the orchestra's doing pulled me in immediately, right?
Oh, that's kind of you to say. But I actually wrote that as a lyric, not a poem. But I'm not a songwriter, I'm not an instrumentalist. And so when I wrote it with too many words. Just said, it's great, but there's too many words. You can't sing it.
Right, not very singable, right?
I gave it a go, but it didn't work. Yeah.
You did try.
As it is, it's fabulous.
And then Tony Clark said, we'll make it a poem. And so, like a lot of things in life, the things that are so important to you are actually things that you don't think much about. And all the things you sweat over and do don't mean a hill of beans in the end. It's funny that way.
That's very true. If I'd have known the last 52 years were going to be so wonderful, I would have enjoyed every moment. As it is, it's been stress all the way. So there you go. Including now. Yes, as a matter of fact, yeah. If I'd have known it was going to be wonderful, I'd have been, hey! But I know what Graeme means, yeah. So there you go. And Mike had the perfect voice for Graeme's poem, yeah.
Yeah, Mike Pinder, who recorded those, right? Fantastic.
Yeah, he had the perfect voice. Mine is a little rough now, but back then cigarettes and alcohol hadn't matured me enough.
When you talk about the surprise delights of 52 years of doing this, and I do want to ask, especially while they're here, but I do want to ask about the fans. It was remarkable to me to hear people from the hall tell me that, when you could come here and fill out cards for who you most wanted to see into the Hall of Fame, that far and away the Moody Blues were the ones that visitors were indicating.
Well, why didn't you do it ages ago then?
What did you? I don't even know how to ask the question, but did you feel like that intensity of love from your fans, was that always there? Is it a thing that you felt building? you know, to have this at this stage, you know, was there a point where you became aware that there was this sort of dedication? I walked into the hotel from the airport, they're here somewhere. The first two guys I met were like, we flew here from South Carolina and Massachusetts just to come see the Moody Blues. You know, when did you start to sense that there was this sort of a, you know, of a groundswell?
I don't know.
Yeah, do you know, for quite a long time, it's been very important to the Moody Blues fans, and I mean, they've given us a wonderful life in music, and they were just, I know because, I mean, we're Europe, or I am, Graeme lives in America now, but I mean, it doesn't have the intensity there, or the meaning, I'm sure you know that, but in America, it's hugely important that the music that people love is validated by somewhere. You know, this is the temple to all of the things that I loved ever since I was a little boy, all of these music and these artists. And I know it is for all of the Moody Blues fans, too. And it was very important for them. And there was one thing I knew, that once they opened the door whenever it was, last summer, and allowed the Moody Blues fans to actually at last have their say, it was a steamroller, baby. You know? It was inevitable. So it took them a long time to open the door, but once they did, our fans were straight through that door. Yeah.
Woo! And they're all here tonight too, an amazing crowd.
Should we take any of the...
Yeah, we haven't gotten one yet. I think we've got some questions coming in from Facebook Live in a moment. But one thing I wanted to ask, you know, Justin, you were saying a moment ago, too, about, you know, you would have enjoyed it a little bit more if you knew where you would have ended up, right, and not...
Yeah, it's been stress all the way.
Right, but I think what's interesting about you guys, and, you know, Alan and I were even talking about the kind of core 7 albums that the fans always talk about. You were innovating on every single one of those, you know, whether it was Graeme using electronic drums or Mike using the Mellotron or, you know, guitar and bass and vocal harmony. It was always something pushing those albums forward. As creative artists, what was that like? Did you feel pressure having to come up with something new, or did you look at that more as a freedom that you were going to experiment? I mean, I've always been curious about that.
The head of our record company was a lovely man that we would occasionally go and have lunch with, called Sir Edward Lewis. And he came to the studio one day on our second or third album, and he said, I don't know what you boys are doing, but people seem to like it, so just carry on. And so that was fantastic to us. And like I say, they didn't give us an A&R guy. All the rest of the people in the company were downstairs with a studio with an A&R guy that was just trying to get a hit. No, you can't, you got to do it like this, so it comes out on AM radio. Decca recognized that it wasn't our style, and the best thing they could do was just leave us alone and see what happened. And we made some mistakes, but we made some lovely things along the way. And I think that comes through in the music, you know, really. But those first 7 albums, yeah. I mean, the pressure for me, and I know for John and for Graeme and for all of us, was on the second album, because we didn't have this angle of the orchestra, did we? We had to just do it ourselves. And we'd come here. We did our first tour here, promoting, supporting other people and playing in psychedelic clubs and things. So it was slightly different. The pressure was on, yeah.
But, you know, it was a strange time because we were touring in America over those 5 years, but also we made 7 albums in those 5 years. And there wasn't any pressure from us because we wanted to get back in the studio, because we were sort of, it was a creation thing that was sort of happening between us. And every tour we did of America, for me personally anyway, I saw so many new different things that I really wanted to write about, but not in a geographical or history thing, but from a way of life point of view. And I think touring America, we were talking about our fans earlier. I must just say, I was traveling through the airport just recently, and a lady came up to me and said, "You won't remember me, but in 1968,
This could go lots of ways.
no, we were touring, and it was Thanksgiving on our first tour, and we had the night off. And she said, my parents felt really sorry for you all. So we all got together, and we invited each of you individually to a different home to share Thanksgiving with us. And I thought, how fabulous was that? 68, and in 2018, she came and said hello. I thought that was brilliant.
It was kind of strange, though, because we were all from England, and we didn't have a clue what Thanksgiving was.
Nobody ever gave us a gig on July the 4th either. No. Strangely enough.
But one thing that's so striking, and I want to get to a fan question here, but you mentioned that the velocity of that period, and not just for you guys, but for so many of the greats of that time, when you look back and see the pace that stuff was coming, with the touring not stopping and with studio time not stopping, it doesn't mean now people, they take 4 years between albums, or they, did it feel like a treadmill, or did it feel like that's what it took to keep up with it?
You know, in London at the time, particularly in London, there were so many artists and bands, and it's a very parochial period of time where we all knew each other. So we all wanted to show everyone, hey, this is our new album, listen to this. And I think all the bands were doing that. I mean, Jimmy came round, didn't he, one day, with his album, and it was just like that. Everyone wanted to play each other's new music. And it really was an exciting time.
That's talking about Jimi Hendrix coming round. My son, who's sitting right there, is grey now and balding. So what am I? But he had a guy he was a fan of, because he's a guitarist, called Lenny Kravitz. Lenny Kravitz? Great guitarist. But he says to me, Dad, look at this album. Lenny Kravitz admires this guy, and I went and bought the album, and it's fabulous. And he put it on and played it, and it's Jimi Hendrix, All Along the Watchtower, was it? Yeah. And I said, this is really funny. Jimmy, I was the first guy to hear that outside the studio, because Jimmy came round to my flat and played it for me. And he said, now bear in mind, I've been on the London Palladium, I've been on the television, I've been on all sorts, never batted an eyelid. But right there and then he looked at me and he said, you know Jimi Hendrix? Only time I impressed him. Still is.
So I'll read, this is a question from a SiriusXM subscriber, so I'll handle this one. What does prog rock mean to you? Because when I first became a fan, prog rock wasn't even a thing. So is it a meaningful, I know we were just having this conversation before we came out here, that everybody's got a different sense of what prog is or progressive rock is. Is it a category that means anything to you?
Well, we've been so many things. We've been glamour rock, I think, and
Psychedelic.
Psychedelic, yeah. That's the long word. Psychedelic, and we've been everything except rock and roll, which is what we are.
All right, we had one here too from Facebook Live. Elaine wants to know, what are your favorite Moody Blue albums in the discography? What are the albums that you're the most proud of?
Well, for me personally, all of them.
It is never fair to make the artists choose between
No,
their children.
I can choose one. I can choose one. It's the third album we made was called On the Threshold of a Dream, and it got to the top of the charts in the UK, and you can only imagine. I mean, I didn't have a stereo system until 1970, so I mean, when you were talking about why we would do it, we didn't have anything else to do. You know, I didn't have a house. I was just paying the payments on my guitar and trying to do the rent. So it wasn't as if we had a life filled with other stuff. So we just wanted to play music, and we were doing gigs. But Threshold of a Dream was the first album that got to the top of the charts in the UK. And it was the one because our lives as young people was not to watch TV or anything, was to go to visit other people's flats. That's an apartment, to their flat, and to listen to music and get turned on. In my case, to smoke a funny little cigarette or something, but to enjoy music and to share music. And it was the biggest thrill I ever had, really, to go, because you'd look through other people's record collections, you'd bring records to them and turn them on, and you'd look through people's collection, and there would be On the Threshold of a Dream in London. And that meant so much to me, and it's a beautiful album, and I think it's the album where we really, everything came together and crystallized, and we came of age as a group then. Yes, it was lovely, yeah. Very special to me.
Yeah, and also, of course, from that album, we started our Threshold record label because of that album, because we were on the threshold of a dream for us.
Kind of something I meant to ask from what Graeme said before. You have been so many things, different styles, different categories or not categories. What for you is what's the through line? I mean, what is the thing that defines whatever it is that the Moody Blues remain over that time?
Melody and upbeat.
Simple and direct. That sound right?
Yeah, I think what's wonderful about the Moody's is that when any of us write a song, we used to sit round a table, we still do, sit round a table, and one of us would play the new song, and as soon as you played the song to the rest of the guys, it becomes a Moody Blues song, and everyone then has their own part in that song, and I think that's, to me, that's the success of our band.
Yeah, that's amazing, right? To think of 50 years of great songwriting comes out of a moment like that, right? We were talking a lot about the early albums. I wanted to just bring up and ask you guys a little bit about the period in the 80s when you're working with Tony Visconti, great producer, great guy, and putting together some of those fantastic albums that bring you to a whole nother audience through MTV, right? And you really become a popular band to a generation that may not have been familiar with those early records. What was that period like, making those and working with Tony and gaining that new audience?
It was a real turning point for us because we'd had an album that hadn't done particularly well, and critically we weren't being accepted as well. And then I met Tony on a project for the BBC, and I knew he'd be right for us. And he was a hero of mine anyway. He's the producer of David Bowie and Hazel O'Connor and Mark Bolan. And anyway, it was a perfect fit, and he was a great player himself. But the records we made then, we made two real solid albums before Tony moved back to New York, which were The Other Side of Life and Sur la Mer. And to actually, for me personally, to actually have a hit, and a couple of hits with Wildest Dreams, and I Know You're Out There Somewhere, and to reach a whole new audience with those records, and to have that chance in life, kind of the second time around. The first time I was a bit distracted, or my mind was elsewhere most of the time. But the second time round, I enjoyed every moment of it. And of course, we had a big video with Wildest Dreams, and we won the Video of the Year award, actually, with the Wildest Dreams. And it's the first time in my life that I would walk down the street and say, where's that Moody Blues guy? Kind of thing, which was absolutely brilliant. But I think it brought a whole new group of people to the band that is still with us now, and is probably the core of our audience now. It was a wonderful time for us, a wonderful time to have success the second time around, and to be alive and awake and aware is a lovely thing.
If this makes sense as a question, what did you learn about the band in that renaissance, in that that other phase, and everything that came with that, and the video side, and did it challenge your sense of what the Moody Blues were, or did it take it to someplace else?
It had changed because two people had left, Mike Pinder, the keyboard player, and Tony Clark, the producer. So things were different. So we had to rethink. Well, not plan anything different, but it was a different group from that time on, and we were able to rise to that challenge for us.
It also came at a great time as well, because the first 7 albums, were really successful. But we were still flying in the back of the plane, turning right, and sharing hotel rooms. But by the time the 80s came, suddenly the whole rock and roll touring had changed. And I think with MTV and touring, sort of chartering planes and having proper hotels, and it was a different time. And I think that's where it changed slightly, and probably, as Justin was saying, it probably became a bit more enjoying. We enjoyed it probably a bit more then, from a different perspective than the early days. I think the early days were the creative parts, and from the 80s going on, we did get into an enjoyment part where we were traveling around, seeing a lot of people, traveling around the world, and it was a great time.
We had another question here from Facebook Live, from Daniel, asking, do you have any advice for fans out there who are trying to be musicians themselves? Any advice for young budding musicians?
I have a 15-year-old guitar player at home, so what do you tell him?
Think very carefully about it. Because the only way you can exist is if you've really got to play whatever instrument you've got. It's the only thing you can think of doing with your life, because you're going to get smacked down so many times. And people don't realize what tender young things we are up here, because we were all over there after 52 years still quivering with nerves. And you don't realize it looks like we're all confident. This is all a front.
I would say trust your own judgment and be yourself. I was lucky enough when I left school to play with one of my own heroes. It was a guy called Marty Wilde. And he told me that he wrote his own songs, and he told me then, to have something, you must express yourself and try and do what you think is right and trust your own judgment. And that's always stayed with me, and I'll always bear that in mind. And I think every young musician should try and find that inner character that they have and personality and try to express it. As far as playing a guitar, you really gotta want to do it, because it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt your boy's fingers, and
it's a commitment, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a painful thing. So people always say, "Oh, well, I had a guitar, but I didn't have any talent. It was all right for you." And I said, "No, I had a great desire to do it, and it really hurt, But you gotta push through that, and I'm sure I wish your boy luck, because if you can play guitar, you'll never be alone. You've always got a pal in that guitar case.
I think I would just say find the instrument that you're in love with, because so many people take the wrong instrument because the parents say, play this, play this, play that. And it's not what they listen to a record, find the instrument you hear. Because some people will hear the guitar, some people hear the drums, people hear the bass, some people hear the keyboards, some people hear the violins. Listen to what you hear, fall in love with that, and then learn to play it 24 hours a day.
As long as it's not drums. Or saxophone.
That's a rough learning curve right there. Graeme maybe just answered this, but another question from a SiriusXM subscriber. Looking back 50 years, if you were to do it all over again, what would you do besides being a rock and roll star? I just read them, man.
I'd
Starve?
No, you know where I'd be? I'd be in the Royal Navy in submarines. Yeah. I've only just thought of that, but yeah, why not?
Okay. That's the first we've heard of that as well.
First I've heard of it as well. Yeah. I couldn't begin to think of being anything else. Never could.
I just did anything not to do a proper job. So there you go, yeah.
Yeah. My father always used to say, a professional musician is someone who'd rather starve than work.
That's right.
I think there's one other thing we have to talk about tonight. In fact, Alan, you and I were talking about it the other day. It's so awesome that in the class getting inducted with you, we also have Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Incredible musician, gospel musician, guitar player. And Graeme, you were talking actually, I think, to Alan a little while on Volume on SiriusXM, talking about that you had a chance to play with Sister Rosetta Tharpe back in the day. Is that right?
In about 61, we were her backing band in Birmingham. Yeah, I don't think we were down in London. I think no, it was in London, but it was in the Denny Lane days, and it's quite amusing. Sister Rosetta Tharpe came, and we had our first rehearsal with her, and she sat on a stool, and we started playing as best we could, and she perhaps died a little inside, but she was very pleasant to us and sang a good blues song, a good blues shouter. And so comes the first gig on the night, and we do 4 or 5 songs, and then we do a dum dum da dum 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 da dum dum for her to come on. And this woman comes flying out the wings, cartwheels, gambols, doubles, somersaults, all singing all the way. But we had it, and she was up and down and going around. I mean, how that woman kept a timing, a vocal, her words, and didn't break something, I shall never know. But apparently that was her sound and the thing she did, which I think Elvis Presley started to copy. I'm dying here.
No, but that is extraordinary, because just to say, people who, I think Sister Rosetta Tharpe is probably the least familiar to a lot of people of the inductees this year. I think one of the glaring omissions in the hall that she hasn't been in, but the impact that she had, and she came several times to England, and everybody, Richards and Clapton and all those guys talk about going to see her when she came to England, and the market
she was on TV a couple of times, and we were all. She had a white Gibson SG, and that was really, really quite the thing at the time, and a beautiful guitar. So she was known, but on TV, but to a certain audience, to a gospel, that was her thing, But for me, this year with Nina Simone as well, Nina Simone was my heroine, and I have heroes, but that I could always think that we could be like Buddy, of course, who's here, and the Everleys, but the real idols that I had when I was young were Nina and Nat King Cole. And I could never be like them because I was a middle-class boy from the west of England. But I think it's a privilege to be just even celebrated in the same street, as Nina Simone as well, and a great influence, a musician, truly. I believe she lived in Europe for the last 20 years of her life as well. Yeah, so she was very well known.
Yeah. Well, I think it's almost time to wrap it up, but I did want to say it's an amazing joy to have you guys here, to see you getting inducted finally on Saturday night right up the hill here into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and to welcome you into this house along with many of those great artists that you've admired over the years.
Oh, thank you very much. Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time this evening and coming out to let everybody get a look at you.
Thank you. Thank you, boys.
Ladies and gentlemen, Justin Hayward, Graeme Edge, John Lodge,
Thank you.
The Moody
The
Blues.
Moody Blues.